name's Derek Jones, and I'm an account manager with the Learning House. This is Christian Brady. He's a senior IT business analyst and product manager. And if you are here for user authentication discussion, you're in the right room. We have some prepared remarks today, but we really want to give you all a lot of time to ask questions. I'm assuming everyone in the room is either curious about the topic or they have specific questions with regard to the topic. So we would like to be sure to give everyone an opportunity to have those questions answered. And we're also going to be sure to give everyone our contact information in case you have any follow-up questions for us. So let's dive right in. In our discussion today, we're going to look at user authentication as it relates to online coursework. We're going to first take a look at what academic dishonesty is. We're going to look at who's admitting to it and why we should care. We're going to look at some of the solutions that currently exist in the marketplace, what's the future of the marketplace looks like, and then we're going to look at some of the solutions that are available to you today as partners of the Learning House and some solutions that are coming down the pipe that you all can take advantage of. So the topic of user authentication is inevitably linked to the topic of academic dishonesty, because ultimately the field of user authentication has piqued the interest of academic institutes and is viewed as the primary means for combating academic dishonesty in the online arena. But what exactly is academic dishonesty? Now, I know I'm speaking to a lot of academicians, and when I say that word, that probably seems pretty obvious. Academic dishonesty, it's been around for forever. But you'd be surprised that in my research, we found specifically with students that were not English speaking primarily, they really had trouble defining what academic dishonesty was and were committing academic dishonesty unknowingly. What we found academic dishonesty to mean, the best definition I found is it's cheating that occurs in relation to a formal academic exercise. And we're going to look at that a little bit more in just a moment. First, I want to show you exactly what academic dishonesty looks like statistically, and I'll just throw a couple out for you. So first, here are some recent findings regarding academic dishonesty. A study by the Center for Academic Integrity found that almost 80% of college students have admitted to cheating at least once. A survey by the Psychological Record reports 36% of undergraduates have admitted to plagiarizing written material. A poll conducted by the U.S. News and World Report found that 90% of students believe that cheaters are never caught or never have been appropriately disciplined having been caught. And the book entitled The State of Americans, This Generation and the Next states that 58% of high school students let someone else copy their work in 1969, and that same study in 1989 found that 97% of students did so. So cheating is here. It's prevalent in online education, it's prevalent K through 12, higher education, and the statistics clearly point that it exists and it's becoming more prevalent. It's clear that academic dishonesty is rampant at all the levels of education, but again, what exactly does cheating encompass? So here's a couple categories that we found academic dishonesty to include, and I can give you some reports and some stories that we've encountered personally with these. In terms of plagiarism, in one of our best practices courses that I'm sure many of you, even in this room, have taken, we've encountered plagiarism in our own courses. We've had instructors that plagiarized material that they personally had previously turned in and didn't cite themselves. When we confronted the instructor about it, maybe confronted is too strong a word, when we notified the instructor, they said to us, I had no idea that that was plagiarism. So you see, in the marketplace, education is key. And academic dishonesty doesn't just include plagiarism. It's fabrication, deception, cheating, bribery, sabotage, professional misconduct, and impersonation. And impersonation is especially key in the online realm. I was reading an article about a lady in South Carolina who had signed up for online courses using the names and personal information of 23 inmates. Before she was caught, she made away with about $490,000. So you can see why user authentication is so important, especially in the online realm, and this academic dishonesty is rampant. So why do we care? You know, academic dishonesty encompasses a range of illegal behavior in the academic environment, and it's rampant, like we said, but why do we care? Well, there are a couple reasons why we care, the first of which is the legislation. The Higher Education of Opportunity Act, I'm going to read a little bit of it to you. It requires that institutions that offer distance education or correspondence education to have its processes in place through which the institutions establish that, and this is the key part, the student who registers in a distance education or correspondence education course or program is the same student who participates in and completes the course or program and receives the academic credit. Now, it goes on to say that to comply, institutions must verify the identity of a student who participates in a class or coursework by using, at the option of the institution, methods such as a secure login and passcode. And I just want to be sure to tell everyone in the room that if you are a partner with the Learning House, you are already meeting this requirement. We require, at a minimum, all students use a unique username and password when logging into Moodle. So you are in compliance with HEOA already by virtue of using us. So I want to be sure to drive that home early on in this conversation. It also says you can use proctored examinations and new or other technologies and practices that are effective in verifying student identification. And Christian's going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. So this is what's coming from the federal level. They've dictated through the Higher Education Opportunity Act that we need to be verifying student identity, and they've given us multiple ways of how to do it. Now, here's what the accrediting body said in response to that legislation. Here's a policy statement from SACS in 2012. It says, at the time of the review by the commission, the institution must demonstrate that the student who registers in a distance or correspondence education course or program is the same student who participates in and completes the course or program and receives the credit by verifying the identity of the student who participates in class or coursework by using, at the option of the institution's, methods such as, and here we go again, it's secure login and passcode, proctored examinations, or new or other technologies and practices that are effective in verifying student identification. So there's clearly a legislative imperative from the federal level. The accrediting bodies in compliance have dictated that we also need to be in compliance. But beyond just the legislative requirements, there are reasons that we need to have academic dishonesty in mind, that we need to be trying to combat it. And the biggest of those is brand equity and degree validation. In 2008, the Sloan Consortium said that 85% of online students attend a school within 50 miles of their home. What that says to me is that even in the online environment, brand equity is a tremendous asset to university. Now, academic dishonesty, fraud, when these things occur, it is only at the detriment of the school's brand equity. So any way that we can combat this is it's going to be significant in driving not only your enrollments, but also retaining your students, because let's be frank, they want to get a degree from a solid university, and they want to be sure that in the future that degree is going to mean something to them. I'm now going to turn it over to Christian, because we have an idea of what the problem looks like. He's going to tell you a little bit about some of the solutions in the marketplace.
So before we get into like solutions that are out there that the Learning House that can provide and so other providers have out there, I'd really like to really understand the market demand for these types of products, maybe open up the scope a little bit. Maybe talk about identity verification and fraud, because that's in fact what we are talking about is fraud. You are having students who are fraudulently taking exams for other students. So there are already products that were developed and are out there available to you that are meeting market demand from other industries in our society. The biggest, credit card fraud. I'm sure that everyone in this room has either been affected by or knows someone who's been affected by identity theft. Using credit card fraud, banking fraud. So some of the products that we're going to talk about here weren't initially developed primarily for higher education, but they're very valid in that market. And so we're noticing on some of the things that Derek brought up with the legislation accrediting bodies that the demand for these products is shifting focus towards higher education and being able to validate that the person who is logging into that particular portal, logging in to take that test, is who they actually say they are and is who is registered on campus with the registrar and who's receiving the financial aid for those courses. So some of the things that have come about because of things like identity thought. We talk about antivirus networking. You know, I'm an IT guy. So, you know, I'm familiar with what we have to do as an organization to protect ourselves. We are also doing those things to protect you. We have all of the antivirus things in place. Our network security is extremely high. We're not only FERPA compliant, but we're also PCI compliant, which is the payment card industry. So that's what the Visas, American Express, MasterCards, that's the security level that they use. So we're also compliant as an organization, the Learning House is, from an IT department perspective, with those policies and procedures. So we're protecting our data, which is also protecting your data. You know, there are organizations out there outside, you know, of FERPA, like HIPAA, with healthcare records. So there's a lot of government legislation and force that's coming down to say that we have to control data, we have to secure data, encrypt data, and we have to make sure that the persons who are accessing those systems are the persons who are supposed to be accessing those systems. So Derek, here, flip me to the next.
Sure.
So let's talk about kind of what user authentication is. So when we think about user authentication in traditional, when you walk in to the DMV or something, they're going to ask you for usually two forms of identification. They're either going to want, you know, a physical identification, your driver's license, a student ID card or something like that. And then also you could be validated through your signature. You're legally signing that you are who you say you are. So that's what we think about when you think about traditional authentication. When you walk into campus and you sign those financial aid forms or you sign your student identification card. When we think about online, as Derek mentioned, unique user ID and password are the requirements of the accrediting bodies and the federal government at this time. However, they encourage taking further steps to authenticate your users by saying that by other technologies that are available. So it's clear that while they haven't come out and said that we're definitely going to require more than username or password, that it's looming out there and eventually we're going to have to do that. And we want to make sure that we arm all of our partners with the tools and the products to meet the demands and the requirements of those governing bodies and can be ahead of the game. Some other things that you might not think about as a user authentication or something is an e-signature. Now I know that every single one of you, when that window pops up that says terms and conditions, when you just bought a software product or downloaded something, I know every single one of you reads every single line of that because I do. So, I mean, you have to guard yourself. But really, guys, what you're doing when you click that box is you are legally agreeing to every single term and condition within there. Think about that next time when you're clicking the checkbox to say, I agree, because you're basically signing that you agree to all of those things. Now, we're going to talk about some enhanced e-signature things that are a little more robust and a little more focused towards higher education. So when we talk about enhanced e-signatures, there are products out there where by using technology, you can use a trackpad, you can use a mouse, you can use a stylus on an iPad or a Kindle Fire or any of those devices to record your signature. That signature can be compared over time. That signature is a legally binding signature if you choose it to be so. It could be something that you have signed in an honor code at the beginning of the course, and then from then on out, when a user comes into the learning management system to access a quiz, access a test, or even just access the portal period, they're asked to sign again. And then there are algorithms out there that look at those signatures, and anything outside of tolerances can be, the institution can be notified that this was way out of whack. We're not sure what's going on here. Some of the advantages to those types of products as well is that it will utilize the webcam to take a picture of the person that signed it. So if a person logs in to take a test and they sign using someone else's thing, they might still be hit with that picture and they might not be expecting it. That picture feature might only be set for midterms and finals. There are configurations, very configurable, to where you can basically make it to where the student doesn't know what they're going to be prompted with. And that adds that level of security to be able to make sure that the student that logs in is the one that's taking that test. A lot of them also offer the ability to capture a IP address or a local timestamp. So if you wanted to flag it to where within certain standard deviations or certain tolerances that this student consistently takes tests and exams from 8 o'clock in the evening to 11 o'clock in the evening Pacific time, and then all of a sudden you get something from an IP address in New York City at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Now, that's completely outside the tolerances that you might be able to set to say that that's wrong. And it might not, I'm not saying that you necessarily have to say that your student can't take the test, but maybe it just sends an alert to the professor. And the professor can just send an email to the student, say, hey Joe, just saw you took the exam, noticed that it was in New York City and it was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, thought that a little strange. So basically the word gets around that these things are being tracked, and so I can't do some of these things that I used to do if I was being dishonest. Some of the other products that are available are user challenge questions. So what does everybody think about when you think about a user challenge question? Mother's maiden name. There you go. Well, I can guarantee you most of the guys that are good friends of mine probably know my mother's maiden name, or if I was going to be dishonest, I could simply tell them. But do those guys know, out of 5 zip codes presented to them in a challenge question, which one I lived at in the past 5 years? If they were my roommate, maybe. Chances are no. So these are the types of questions that these products offer. They're public information. They're things that you can't predict. You would have to be that person to really know the answers to those questions. Things like the address, roommates, anything that's a matter of public record, these companies can aggregate that data on an individual and be able to present that individual with a number of challenge questions to be able to say, answer these, and they're, again, configurable to where you could say, we have to answer, there's 3 challenge questions, you have to answer 2 of the 3 correct, or maybe you have to answer 2 of the 3, or if you missed 1, then we're going to give you an additional one, a 4th challenge question. If you pass that one, you're good. If you fail that one, you're done. They can also offer negative questions, where none of the above is the correct answer. And that's how they get to that 99.9% of individuals we can offer at least a certain number of challenge questions per exam, is that they just mix in those negative questions in there where there's nothing correct. So this is a very strong option because it's not something that is easily faked. And if the person cheating on an e-signature is the person who signs it the first time and gets their picture taken, then what's to keep that person from continuing doing that throughout the course? Whereas this, you might be able to do it the first time, get it lucky, but chances are statistically you're not going to be able to pass it. Now, all of these products are not foolproof. I mean, obviously, if I'm sitting next to Derek and Derek's enrolled, but I'm taking the class for him, as long as Derek can answer those questions, then it's still possible to get around these things. But they're deterrents. Maybe it doesn't ask me every single time. Maybe it only asks me every 3rd time, to where I think that maybe it's just a quiz or a test, so I don't worry about it. And I'm like, good. It hasn't asked me the last 2 quizzes I've taken, so I'm not worried about it. All of a sudden, bam, it hits me again, and I have no idea how to answer those questions, and I fail the thing miserably. That's a red flag for the instructor that shows up. Or you could configure it to where you won't even let them take the exam, and say, no, you have to take a proctored exam now. So, kind of segueing into other products that we have are proctoring products. They're products where you could actually contract with testing centers across the country for your online students to come sit down in front of a computer in a proctoring center like they would to take the SAT or the ACT and take their examinations. Now that's great because that's probably the most secure version that you can get. What's the two problems with that? Number one, it costs too much. Number two, the whole beautiful thing about online learning is it's convenient. That's not convenient. I have to go somewhere to sit down for an exam, and I have a certain amount of time to do that. If maybe I like to take my exams at 2 o'clock in the morning, well, this doesn't work. There are proctoring products that just integrate with the learning management system to where it's a webcam type of product to where you sit down in front of the exam, the webcam comes on, there's someone at a proctoring center that proctors the entire class. That's available too. It's not cheap because that still requires you to contract with someone to sit there and proctor. And to be quite frank, that brings out the creepy factor a little bit. I don't want my daughter sitting in front of a webcam to take an exam with someone on the other end who I don't know. So that's just me, and I don't like that. There are products out there that don't actually use a person proctoring. It's more just a snapshot. It takes a snapshot every 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and it produces a report. So the instructor would get their 20-student report, and there'd just be a line for each student that had their picture to make sure that the person that started the exam finished it, and that matches a photo that was submitted at the beginning of the semester or the beginning of the program. So there are some options out there for proctoring, but they're not cheap. Most of these you're talking probably somewhere in the neighborhood of $4 to $8 per student per exam to have these proctored. So they're available, and it's very secure, but they are expensive. So those are the things that are out there now. I mean, the Learning House has options for you if you're interested, and we will certainly work if you want to contract with someone else that can integrate with the Moodle Learning Management System. We'll certainly work with all of our partners to make that happen. But what's coming down the road? What's next? The majority of laptops are shipped now with a fingerprint scanner on them, biometrics. A lot of technology has been developed where the trackpad on the laptop can actually take a fingerprint. That's pretty hard to fake. Retinal scans, the technology's there. It's just a matter of implementing it to be able to utilize it in this fashion. So those are available, and that's really what's next. Now this last, voice recognition the same way. That's been around for a long time. You see on the movies, people walk up and they have to say their voice and scan their hand, and it's available. The last one is keystroke recognition. Now I saw this, and Derek actually brought it up to me about keystroke recognition. I said, yeah, whatever. You can't tell the difference between me and Derek based on the way that I use a keyboard. I read a white paper on it. Apparently you can. The way that you interact with your keyboard is actually just as unique as your fingerprint. It's unique in the way that you strike keys and the pattern in which you type. It's coming. It's right around the corner, and it's much more secure than the products that are available today. The problem is that the research and development that's going into these types of things is a ways away before it being economically suitable in higher education. Derek?
Before we close today, I wanted to take a few moments to talk about ways that we can combat academic dishonesty, not just with new authentication methods, but you can actually combat academic dishonesty in the way that you develop your curriculum, the way that you deliver assessments. And so I've been leaning heavily on our curriculum department, and they've helped me come up with a couple best practices that I would just want to briefly share with you all. And these are things that you can begin implementing today with our curriculum. So if you guys have any more follow-up on this, please feel free to talk to me afterward and we can set you up. So the first is to utilize assessment diversity. I mean, how many of you all are familiar with a course that maybe there's 2 very heavily weighted exams, and that's the majority of your grade? When I was in college, I took courses like that. Unfortunately, in the online environment, it's courses that are set up in that fashion that really kind of promote the issue that we have with academic dishonesty. We found that the more diversity you use in your assessments, and when we define assessments, we say that they're designed to measure students' performance and provide automatic feedback. Assessments can range from writing assignments to quizzes, capstone projects, group work, and online exams. So the more diverse you make your assessments, the more difficult you make it to cheat. Another thing we recommend is to use written assignments and threads, because threads, particularly, they promote independent thought, independent discussion. It's a way that you get to know someone. Just like I'm speaking to you now, you get to know someone's style, you get to know how they think, where they're coming from, and if something kind of catches you off guard on a thread, you're a lot more likely to pick it up as the semester goes on. Written assignments are particularly useful because of programs like Turnitin. We actually integrate with Turnitin. We can run any paper through the Turnitin resource. I'm sure you all are familiar with this, and you can determine if the content's been plagiarized. I can give you a practical example of test banks and timed assessments. We had a school that they set up courses that had, for this particular program, that all the assessments in the courses were timed for 90 minutes. There were 100-question assessments, and they had a student that they thought perhaps was committing academic dishonesty. Now, the reasoning behind it was the student was only taking 9 minutes to take each assessment. They'd done this twice, and they had received A's both times, when the average in the course was that the tests were taking up to 60 minutes, and students were getting a B average. And so in situations like that, we recommend that you create a test bank, because what we thought had happened was that the student had perhaps gotten an old test that was being reused, that they had been able to print out maybe this test because they'd actually taken the course before. I forgot to mention that. So they'd failed the course the first time, the second time around doing remarkably better, and they're doing it very swiftly. So we assumed that there's some sort of academic dishonesty going on there. So we set up a test bank that rather than pulling 100 questions in 90 minutes, we put 200 questions in there. And then the Moodle system has the capability to pull select questions for every student. So each student is getting a different exam. And so it's very difficult in that scenario to replicate the same test over and over again. And for professors who like to use, let's say, the same exam for multiple semesters, let's say because of the same textbook that's being utilized, they can ensure that students aren't going to be able to cheat from semester to semester. And finally, raising awareness. We've touched on this a lot today. Honor codes really go a long way with your online students. You can establish something that maybe they have to sign and submit to you, but research has indicated that honor codes really do help curb academic dishonesty. So again, institutions that offer online courses with the Learning House are presently in requirement with all the requirements of the Higher Education Opportunity Act, if they have, at a minimum, a unique username and password for each student. We established that as partners of the Learning House, you all have done so. As new identification technologies are developed and become more sophisticated and less expensive, more mainstream, accrediting agencies and legislative bodies will evaluate their use in the future, and we can assume that they will expect institutions to begin to adopt these accordingly. The Learning House currently offers a range of students to meet the demands of our partner schools, and we can begin implementing these solutions with your schools today. They not only will allow you to meet the basic demands of the HEOA and your accrediting bodies, but will give you confidence in your online student outcomes, and that's really what it's all about. As always, as your partner, we're going to consult with you on any changes in legislation in the market. I don't know if you guys have seen on the schedule, we have Michael Goldstein who will be speaking at this conference. Michael Goldstein is a lawyer. He works in Washington, D.C., and he's one of the leading legal counsels in the realm of higher education. So we're on the cutting edge by virtue of Michael Goldstein. We're on the cutting edge of all these issues. So we're going to keep you on the cutting edge as well. And we're prepared to help you work proactively to curb academic dishonesty that's occurring today and help you implement any new technology and assessment best practices in the future. So rest assured knowing that we will work to stay ahead of the legislation, and we'll always be working for you, our partner schools. So that's the end of our prepared remarks today. And we'd like to open up the floor to any questions from the audience. We were that good, huh? Yeah,
no,
sure, go
no
ahead.
question.
Well, it's more of a comment, and I'm quoting the source I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
I think I heard it on NPR in the last few weeks. There's some study that just came out, and it was about cheating
Mm-hmm.
and how it's embedded in our culture
Mm-hmm.
because students want to do well and all that. There was a lot of reasons about the motivation for doing it. And one of the biggest deterrents was making sure students know the expectations,
Mm-hmm.
the honor code like you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and that the professor says the same thing that the institution says, that everybody in the whole institution has the same mores, and it's in the honor code, it's in the handbook, it's in your course syllabus, it's everywhere you go, so that you're actually teaching the moral and ethical expectations as well as, because one of the things that came out was we expect students to know the honors, and but they don't.
Yeah.
Even professors, we don't always know what cheating is and what isn't.
Yeah.
Making sure that everybody throughout the institution is constantly singing the chorus.
Mm-hmm. I was at a school in the last month, and we were doing an on-site training, and we talked about this issue of academic dishonesty. And the example I gave you all earlier about plagiarism came from that session. So there were students that once the teachers started interacting, it's a small school, so the teachers were interacting, and a student had turned in a very unique paper for one of his or her courses, and then these teachers just happened to be talking about this paper, and another teacher said, he turned in that same paper for me. And when they confronted the student about it, he was very remorseful, but his response was, I didn't realize that was plagiarism. So really just having the knowledge is one thing, but I think we make a fatal assumption that the students know what cheating is, and some of them don't.
Because it's so easy to do that.
Yeah, and they're starting it early. I mean, the statistics show it's starting in high school. And so if they're not learning it then, I mean, who knows what they're bringing over from there to the college level. Yeah, great question and comment.
Is there a way to set up an alert? In other words, I'll sometimes go back and track to see time-wise.
Yeah.
Well, if I set a time limit of 50 minutes for a 50-question test, or I'll look and
Yeah.
and you brought up the example of somebody taking 9 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way, and maybe not currently in Moodle, but as you move to Moodle 2, is there a way to set up an alert? So if I set some parameters, anybody who takes the exam in under 10 minutes or something like that, I get notified of that, or do I need to go in and look at every single at the activity report for every single person in something of that nature?
That's a great question.
Well, I think in moving to the Moodle 2.2 platform, there is custom reporting features that were developed by our product development team, where you could actually maybe, the report that you could build, you could set those parameters to say that if I select a course, an exam, and if there is a duration for that given exam that's less than a certain amount, then it would produce a report with those numbers on there for you. So there is that functionality that has been built by the product team to custom report, and then also if it's something that's a little bit, maybe it's not included within that custom report functionality, and it's something that you'd want is meaningful to you and your organization, then reach out to your relationship manager, and they'll talk to myself and to our product team, and we'll look to see, well, is this a report that is meaningful to all of our schools? Then we'll just go ahead and write the report and add it to our canned reports that are built within the Moodle LMS as well. So it's the data is there. I know that the data is stored in the database. It's a matter of how to extract it and make it meaningful. So if it's not available through custom reporting within the interface that builds custom reports, I'm sure that our product team could write a report that would meet those needs.
And then one other thing, you mentioned about having test banks and I guess having random selection of those. Is that available now?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah,
I did look into that and really couldn't get a clear answer on that. And that would be really helpful.
Is that 2 or 1?
Both.
Both. Yeah.
So you could have here, but I mean, I could have a test bank of 100 questions and have a random selection of just 50 of those questions, a random selection for 50 questions.
Yep.
Sure.
And we can scramble the answers too. Yep.
Well, we'll talk to you about it then.
Because the vendors like Sage and all those provide those to professors, to instructors.
Mm-hmm.
So we can borrow them if we, right? I mean, we could bring the bank in, we don't have to create the whole bank ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Conceivable.
For us, one of the challenges that we've had with our instructors is just, going back to one of your slides, it's just a different mentality in how you evaluate students.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of our faculty have created this memorization, multiple choice tests, and you
Yeah.
would assume the student has the access of the internet.
Yeah.
Unless you make the time so short that they just have to know it in their head. They really do, I think, a lot of times have to just reevaluate how they are assessing students.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Dr. Kleinfelter made, in the opening remarks, talked about the instructors engaging with the students. And one of the points that Derek brought up was that if the outcomes that you're trying to get from these courses is more interactive, the opportunity for cheating is less.
Yep.
Because it's not a multiple choice test. It's more of a critical thinking type of exam. So
There are some things that are done now at the course level. Are you all familiar with the term prepping process that's done to every one of your courses before they launch? So sorry if everybody knows this. I'll just give you a quick rundown. Before every single course launches, your client service specialist will go through the course and look for technical settings and make some changes based on best practices in the industry. And they do look at your assessments. So some of the things they might do are recommend times for your tests. They might set only 5 questions per page. The reason why we do that is if you have all of your questions on one page, you can print the entire page and you've got all the test questions there. But if you only have 5 questions per page, it's much more labor intensive to print everything. So we're doing some of those things on the front end already. I don't know if you guys are aware of that, but there's a lot more that we can do if you would like for us to do. Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Well,
right.
if you
Thank you
guys,
all.
yeah, thank you all for
very much
coming. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to Christian or I. It's my understanding that this video is going to be available. So if anybody at your institutions would like to know a little bit more about the topic, we'd be happy to talk to them as well. So thank you all.
Thank you.